9 rural Alaskan communities, 10 social workers are practicing, and in a variety of ways, incorporating dual relationships into their professional lives. Historically, dual relationships were to be avoided at all costs. We found that in rural Alaska, dual relationships were not only unavoidable, but frequently of value, having the potential to both enrich and enhance professional practice. The purpose of this study was to examine ethical challenges unique to social workers living and working in rural communities, specifically those challenges related to dual relationships. Through in-depth interviews, this study examined the perspectives and experiences of 10 rural social workers and identified 4 strength-based themes that described how they successfully negotiated the challenges of dual relationships. This study used a phenomenological approach, a form of research that focuses on direct experience. We conducted semi-structured, in-depth interviews. Interview questions were developed around specific topics. Some questions focused on boundary issues, what kind had been encountered, what the social workers' direct experiences had been, how they were able to resolve them, and what resources they found helpful. Others focused on issues surrounding confidentiality, indiscreet clients, or gossip. Some questions asked about gifts and barter, accepted practices in rural communities. Other questions revolved around community activities, benefits to the clients, difficulties that social workers experienced, what the community social worker chose to participate in and why. Social workers were asked about limitations in their personal lives. One social worker relayed the experience of attending an AA meeting and having one of her clients question her reason for being there. The social worker realized that her presence kept her client from being comfortable, therefore compromising her client's ability to participate in the group interaction. Questions around the strengths and weaknesses of their formal education were also addressed, as were their support systems, both personal and professional. And finally, questions were asked about their perception of the positive aspects of dual relationships. After institutional review board approval was obtained for the study with the University of Alaska Fairbanks, we began recruiting subjects using propulsive sampling to identify social workers in Alaska communities with populations below 10,000. We identified and recruited participants through 2 email listservs as well as through snowball sampling. We conducted interviews in teams of 2, with our professor introducing the student research teams to the participant and outlining the procedures that would follow. One student researcher conducted the interview, the other sat in the role of a silent observer. When the interviews were concluded, our professor stepped in to answer any questions or concerns a participant might have. The interviews were recorded and subsequently transcribed. All researchers then participated in an initial coding section of the first transcript, where a basic set of codes was developed, defining categories loosely suggested both by the questions we asked and the responses made by our participants. Each remaining transcript was subsequently assigned to 2 researchers to code individually. At a later date, the entire group reviewed the results to check for consistency. When their interviews were concluded, transcribed and coded, it became apparent while analyzing the data that 4 themes had developed. The first theme, rural realities. Rural social work cannot avoid dual relationships. Our research found that frequency of interaction within the community was both commonplace and unavoidable. We also found that there was significant overlap between personal and community life, school activities, grocery shopping, and community events. Frequently, service relationships were problematic. With one grocery store, one mechanic, one school, the sizes of the communities precluded other choices for the social workers.
Theme 2, when applying a strength perspective, rural social workers feel that dual relationships can be beneficial to their clients, as they are part of an interwoven relationship that makes up the fabric of rural communities. Deeper understanding of community traditions, beliefs, and behaviors allow the rural social worker to connect with people on a deeper level as they are able to relate to the history and rhythms of the community. Anna, a study participant, highlighted this point, saying, It might not necessarily be each client that you have all this knowledge about, but it helps that you live with the people, you're part of the people. I see that as a benefit. Trust is the basis of all social services. Much of Alaska is served by itinerant service providers that travel to rural communities while living in and maintaining offices in larger cities. This method of service delivery prohibits the community from investing in the itinerant worker from outside and prohibits the itinerant worker from developing the trust of the people within the community. Cultural knowledge is extremely important in rural practice. There is a history in Alaska of rural Native communities being disempowered by services that have been provided in culturally insensitive ways. The participants in this research were clear that practice in rural communities without cultural knowledge is not effective. While they acknowledge risks associated with dual relationships, the benefits of cultural and community knowledge almost always outweigh the risks associated with ethical challenges. Theme 3, ethical challenges are inevitable in all social work practice, and professional education helps to guide practitioners in how to address the complex relationships that they will face in their communities, no matter what the size or where the community is. Participants in this study found that training on professional ethics in both their degree programs as well as in continuing education helped them to manage relationships in a way that allows them to practice effectively while navigating those challenges successfully. One of those challenges, confidentiality, is an issue that impacts all social work practice. The rural practitioner contends with particular challenges of protecting confidentiality in a small community. As their professional education prepares them for expectations regarding confidentiality, their experience in the field helps them learn to create healthy boundaries that protect both their client and themselves. All participants in this study noted the benefits of peer relationships with other social workers and the use of professional supervision in dealing with ethical challenges. These relationships were developed and cultivated in their cohorts during their professional social work education and continue to be invaluable to them in their current practice.
Alright, so the fourth theme, rural practice adds a whole new layer of complexity with dealing with social work ethics. And as a result, our participants seem to have developed advanced critical thinking skills when implementing the NASW Code of Ethics. So many rural social workers in Alaska have been a part of their communities for most, if not all, of their lives, and often they're related to many community members. So with this comes the burden of knowing some, personal, intimate histories of many of your clients. With this additional burden on the social worker, they really gain the ability to deal with any personal biases they may have, and to deal with personal knowledge, deciding what information they should use and what information needs to be disregarded. Additional information often comes to them through gossip. In these small communities, there's little that happens that doesn't eventually become common knowledge. Friends and family members will often seek out the social worker out in the community with information about certain clients without that client's permission. All of the participants really found that there were times when the information doesn't need to be ignored, but there were times when the information should be utilized when they're working with the clients. The responses really showed us that they have really advanced critical thinking skills, self-reflection, and common sense when they're dealing with these types of issues. Another main concern is confidentiality. The participants really have to work hard to maintain the confidentiality of their clients, even when the clients don't. Many of them noted situations where clients would seek them out in the community, ask them questions about their case, and many of the participants really developed a system for handling this. They remind the clients in the moment of their right to confidentiality, but also they discuss these types of scenarios and how they'll be handled during initial client meetings. From situations like this, the participants learn the importance of role distinction, and they use the concept of wearing different hats to describe how they manage their different roles within the community. So, for example, when they're working as a social worker, they say they wear their social worker hat. When they're in the community as a community member, they're wearing that hat. This idea of hat really helps to set boundaries for the clients outside of the office. And by setting and maintaining these boundaries, we really saw the increased skills and ethics management that these rural social workers had. Our last point is gift giving. Gift giving, bartering, and sharing are all ways of life in rural Alaskan communities. Many of our participants were offered gifts by their clients, and often these gifts are accepted. They're accepted to ensure that cultural traditions are respected and acknowledged, and that their clients aren't offended or embarrassed. They really thought deeply about the intent or meaning behind the gift and responded in a way that they felt would be most beneficial for the client. In summary, the strength perspective is important not just when working with clients, but also in negotiating ethical dilemmas. We really saw that it should be used to look at the ethical challenges that many rural social work professionals face. The past research really focuses on the negatives of dual relationships, but it doesn't really go very far to help these rural practitioners where this really isn't avoidable. Our participants were able to use the benefits that come with being familiar in a community while balancing the risks by keeping the best interests of their clients as their main focus. Future research needs to focus on the nuanced aspects of these issues, more specifically what the professional decision-making steps are when dealing with dual relationships in a rural setting. And legitimizing this reality would give rural social workers the opportunity to be able to share what skills that they have learned and continue to grow their own skills. The strengths perspective says that we should look for the positive aspects of complex issues and utilize resources rather than focusing on our limitations. So applying this approach to rural social work can really result in stronger and more effective practice. Anybody have any questions?
Yeah, some questions. Very nicely timed.
Yes?
How did you get into this research? Are you all social work, going into social work, or working with these women already that you surveyed or worked with?
So the question was, how did we get into this type of research?
We're all social work students,
Yeah.
and we took this actually a rural social work class from our professor, and it started as kind of a class project. And our professor quickly realized that this could be something more, and so we continued, had a special class, and that's how we did it.
Dual relationships are also something that we deal with on a daily basis in small communities, and it was something that we noticed. Most people are told that you're supposed to avoid dual relationships at all costs, and we just discovered that we can't, and we have to actually use those in our practice.
Some of the social workers that we interviewed also, they at times were hesitant about how much they wanted to say because it's a discouraged practice. And what they have all found in their communities is that the reality is that you can't avoid it, and that there are ways that it actually can strengthen your practice.
And it should be noted also that we're all part of a distance program. So the students going through our program are from all around the state. Very few of us live in cities. So we actually live in these rural communities. We plan on working in these rural communities. And we understand the realities that we're going to face. And so, when just not sufficient because we know we're gonna have to contend with these challenges.
Any questions? Comments?
So going forward now in terms of the class, do you see what your research informing this rural social work class, what's going to be covered in there, and how they might integrate the relationship?
Well, I hope that perhaps more research can be done and ultimately either modify or change the curriculum to go more in depth into rural ethical issues. And perhaps have something added to the code of ethics that provides some guidance rather than just avoid it.
And looking at it rather as a strength rather than as one of the problematic areas of social work.
Did you make any connections to the challenges of other professionals in the community, like ministers and doctors? And I mean, a lot of people must face this dual relationship situation. I don't know if there's other literature, you went into that other literature about that, or?
We didn't, we were,
Yeah, there's only so much you
we
can
were
do.
already inundated with
But
data
Yeah.
from our research.
But you might be able to draw some connections.
Oh, in the
anyway.
future, absolutely, absolutely.
Most literature is written from an urban perspective.
Mhm.
There really is a lack of literature written from a rural perspective. And so we do hope that this may spur additional research that really specifically looks at rural issues, because huge amount of providers, service providers, are rural practitioners.
Yeah. Good comments or questions? I just really want to congratulate you on your article.